Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. Today we'll continue with Power BI and DAX. We are going to look at a very important exercise, which is basically how to calculate the percent of total. Suppose you have a matrix or a table and you have several lines and a grand total. We need to see the percent of each and every line to the grand total. During the video, we're going to discuss the filter context generally in a very basic way, and also how to deal with calculate, remove filters, and all selected. At the end of the video, we're going also to look how to calculate the same percent using the new visual calculation and see how is the difference between the two methods. Let's go directly to Power BI. We're going to check the example and then see the different exercises of today. We are working on AAA BIX model, which is a basic star schema model containing 5 tables. In the middle, we have the transaction table, which is basically sales T, showing the daily transaction for sales. And then we have 4-dimensional table. First one is calendar to show the different dimension of the date. And then we have the region to get the name of the region, channel to get the name of the channel. And finally, we have the product containing the name of the category, the name of the product, and also the price list or the price for each and every product. If we check the report view, we have only one visual, which is basically a matrix visual showing the total sales for each and every region with the grand total. And these total sales calculated using a measure. If we check the measure, which is basically total sales, you will see that we used the SUMX function. SUMX function iterated over the sales T table using the quantity for each and every transaction. And then we used related to get the price from the product table. And finally, you multiply the quantity times the price times 1 minus discount in order to get the total sales. The requirement is to create another column here in this visual containing the percent of the total. Meaning that, let's say for the Alex, we have 18 million. We need to show how much this 18 million as percent of the 120, which is basically the total. Same for Cairo, same for Canal, and so on and so forth till end of the table. In order to start with our calculation, we need just to remind ourselves with the filter context. What this means, if you look at the numbers that we have here, these numbers are created using one measure. What is this measure? Measure is total sales. And normally total sales is just trying to reach the total, the grand total of everything, of all the sales inside the model, which is basically 120 million USD. When we drop this inside the visual, and we have also a dimension for the region, you will see that the same measure produces different numbers for the same calculation. This means that Alex has different and unique number, Cairo has different and unique number, and so on and so forth, although we are just using the same calculation. And this is how the filter context works. Each and every item from the region dimension or from the region field is a filter for this visual. So the engine of Power BI is just using these lines as a filter, and this is more or less the filter context. Now let's think about our calculation, which is basically the percent of total. It's basically to divide this number for Alex, 18253, over 120 million. Same for Cairo, this number over the grand total, and then this number over the grand total, and so on and so forth. In order to do this inside this visual, we need to just look at the total at each and every line. In other words, I need to create another column here, and this column containing numbers, but these numbers are nothing but the grand total. In each and every line, I need to see the grand total here, the grand total here, the grand total here, and so on and so forth. And finally, I can just take this number, the 18 million, and then divide on the other column number, and then divide this over this, this over this. And in this way, I'll be able to get the percentage that I want. The task to get the grand total everywhere here is not straightforward. Why? Because of the filter context. In each and every line, the filter context will force the numbers to be specifically for Alex, specifically for Cairo, and so on and so forth. So I need some sort of a function that can help me to control the filter context, which is basically the calculate function, and this is exactly what we are going to use. From Home tab, new measure, this will prompt me to the formula bar. Let me call this percent of total region, and then equal and Alt Enter. Let's try to use calculate together. I'm going to type calculate. First requirement is an expression, and expression is nothing but a calculation and we already have a calculation which is a measure called total sales, so we can evaluate this calculation. In order to call a measure inside the model, I'm going to open a square bracket. The only selection that we have is total sales. Let me just put it a new line just to keep the formatting right, and then comma, and then Alt Enter, and then we need to add a filter. This is the second requirement. I can add filter 1, filter 2, and so on and so forth. But in reality, if you think about what we try to do, we need to remove a filter. If we manage to remove the filter that we have on the region, on each and every region, we'll manage to get the total sales in all the lines. In order to remove a filter, I can use a function called REMOVEFILTERS. And this is the beauty about DAX. You will see that the name of the function is representing exactly what it is doing. So I'm going to start with REMOVEFILTERS, and then it requires either a table name or column name. Let's stick to the column name that we need to remove the filters from, which is basically the name of the region. This is inside the table called region. So let me type region. Here you go. You have the region, the name of the table, and then region, which is basically the name of the field. And then I'm going to close the bracket for remove filters, Alt Enter once more, and close the bracket for calculate, and let me hit the check mark, and let's see our new measure. If you just drag and drop inside the visual, you will see that we have the 120 million everywhere inside the column percent of total region, meaning that I can just easily take the total sales and divide over our new calculation, and this will produce the percent that I want. Let me go back to our measure. Now I need to add a function called divide in order to divide the total sales over the calculation that we just made together. So another Alt Enter and then divide. The numerator will be just the total sales, Alt Enter, and then again I'm going to call the total sales measure, and then comma, the numerator will be the outcome of the calculate function. I believe we just need to close the bracket for divide, hit the check mark, and now I believe we are good to go. You can see that I have decimal numbers. Let me change this to a percentage and 0 decimal places, and now we are good to go. The 100% in the total, and you have here the percent for each and every region, and I believe it is very easy and straightforward. So let's try to add some more complications. I've added a slicer for the region column, and currently I'm not selecting anything, and you can see that all the regions appears. Now let's try to select some of the regions. Let me select Alex, and then Delta, and then Sinai. I have only 3 regions, no problem. You will see that the visual filter down, I have only the 3 regions. Total changed to 52 million instead of 120. But the percent in the total line is 43.5. What is this percent? This percent is representing the 52 million of the grand total divided over the 120 million, the grand total of all the regions together. And if you check the individual percent, it is still the same, no change. 15% of the 120, 15% of 120, and then 13% of the 120. In most of the cases, this is absolutely fine. You want to show it this way, no problem at all. But in some cases, you want to see the percent of the total selected regions only, meaning that you need to see here the 100%, and here you need to see the 18 million over the 52 million, which is basically something like 30 something percent. In order to do so, we need to change something in our measure, and let me select the same measure, percent of total region. I'm not going to change it, but just I'm going to take a copy, Control C, and then new measure, and Control V, and then I'm going to change the name. Let me call it percent of selected regions. Now, if you remember what we did using calculate, we used remove filter in order to remove the filter from all regions. The only tweak that I'm going to do is just to replace the remove filters function with another function called all selected. Let me just select this and replace it with all selected function. All selected will ignore all the filters. However, it will keep the filters for only the selected regions. This is exactly what I want. I want to limit the total to only the selected region. So let me just hit the check mark. And also I need to change to percent, 1 decimal place. Now I think I have the new measure here, percent of selected. Let me drop it inside the same visual. And here you go. I have the new percentage. 34% 0.8 for Alex, 34.8 for Delta, 30% for Sinai, and you can see here I have the 100% in the total line, and this is the other way that you can use to show your data. In the next section, we are going to try to add some different complication to the same exercise. I just removed the percent of selected region from the visual, and also I removed the slicer so we can focus on the new variation of this example. Now suppose that I need to add another dimension to the same visual, meaning that I want to see the regions, but before looking into regions I need to look at the channels. If you look at the right hand side in the table channel, we have a dimension or a column called channel. Let's try just to take it and just put it over the regions. In this case, you will see that I have 4 channels. The grand total now didn't change, but we have the different channels, 15 million for door-to-door, 35 million for key accounts, and so on and so forth. If we expand one of these channels, let's say door-to-door, you will see that we have the different regions. If you look at the numbers, you will see that the 15 million is broken down by region, 2 million, 2 million, 2 million, and the total is the 15 million. Same for key accounts and same for retail, and so on and so forth. Let's look also at the percentage. Let's start by the door-to-door. Door-to-door is 100%. Itself, it's 100%. Also, we have each and every channel as 100%, and we have the grand total as 100%. If you check also the regions under each and every channel, you will find that we have this percentages is adding up to the 100%. Alex is 15% of the 15 million of door-to-door. Cairo here is 2.2 million, which is 15% again of the 15 million of the door-to-door, and so on and so forth. But why we didn't manage to get the percent of the door-to-door to the grand total? Why it's always 100%? This is because of the technique that we used inside our measure. Let's check our measure once more. You will see that I removed the filter from the regions only, meaning that the filter is still respecting the channel. In this line, I'm just dividing the 15 million over another 15 million. The filter context forced that the selection of the percent of total region, the denominator that we calculate, is the same, 15 million over 15 million, which is basically 100%. So if I want to see the door-to-door, actually if you want to show it this way, that's absolutely fine. If this is the way that you want to present it, no problem at all. But suppose that you want to show in the same table the 15 million of door-to-door divided over the 120, and here you see the percent of door-to-door of the grand total. At the same time, you want to see each and every region as a percent, not of the parent, but of the grand total. So let's say this is 2 million out of 120, which is basically, let's say, 2% or so. We need to show here 2%, here 2%, 2%, and then this adding up to, let's say, 10% of the door-to-door or whatever. In order to do so, again, we need to do another tweak in our calculation. So let me again select percent of total region. I'm going to take another copy, new measure, Control V. Let me change this to percent of channel and region. Now, in order to consider also removing filter from channels, I need to add another filter in the same calculation. I have here calculate. Calculate requires an expression, and then filters. I can add filter 1, filter 2, filter 3. Also, we have remove filters, which requires, if we recall, a table name or a column, but you can add column 1, column 2, column 3, and so on and so forth. So let's try to add another column inside remove filters. I'm going to add a comma, and then let me try to select the table channel, and from table channel the column called channel. I believe this is fine. Let me hit the check mark, and you will see that I have an error. This will not work. Why? Because remove filters, it can take more than one column, but these columns need to be from the same table. So this technique won't work. Let me just delete what I added here. But I have no problem because calculate itself can take more than one filter. So I can just come here, add a comma, Alt enter, add new line into calculate function. Let me remove filters again. This time I'm going to remove the filter from channel, close the bracket and hit the check mark. Here is my new measure. Let me drop it in the same table. Let me just increase the size, and here you go. You have 12.5% for door-to-door, which is 15 million over 120. And then you have almost 2% for Alex, 2 million over 120, and so on and so forth. And if you check any of these channels, it will be exactly the same. Till the moment, we have a matrix containing 3 measures. First one is the total sales, and this total sales broken down firstly by channel and then by region. And also we have 2 types of percentages. First one, you can call this percent of total region, or you can call it now percent of parent. What this means, meaning that the 2 million here is divided by the 15 million, resulting in 13.4%. The last column containing percent of channel and region, and you can call this also percent of grand total, meaning that the 2 million here divided by 120 million resulted in 1.7%. So this is exactly what we have till the moment. And before moving forward, let me just show you something very quickly. If you try to take out the total sales from this visual, so I can just go here and you can find here all the measures that I have inside this visual. I have total sales, percent of total region, percent of channel region. So let me take out the total sales. You will find that it is absolutely fine. You can just focus only on the percentages and no need to show the numbers or the absolute numbers itself. And why? Because these DAX measures are focusing or working with the model itself, working with the tables that we have inside the model. It's not depending at all on the visual itself or what's presented in the visual itself. But this concept is not exactly the same like what we are going to present now, which is basically the new visual calculation. Let me do a quick undo so I get back the total sales. And now let's try to do the same 2 calculations, percent of parent and percent of grand total, using the new visual calculation. The new visual calculation concept will depend on the data or the columns that we have already inside the visual that we have, meaning that it will not look at the model itself, it will not look at the tables of the model, it will just work with the numbers that we have or the columns that we have inside this visual. And if you are aware of the Excel, especially the pivot tables, there is something called show value as. The new visual calculation is very similar to show value as for pivot table in Excel. So let me just go here, right click, and I'll have an option of new visual calculation. And if you check the options, you have something called percent of parent and percent of grand total. Let me start by percent of parent. Once I click on it, you'll see that it will put the report in something called the focus mode. On the top half, you have the report, the view of the report. In the lower half, you will see that I have a formula bar, and also I can present the data, and you'll see it's added automatically a new column called percent of parent. In the formula bar, I can just change the name, but let me leave it as is at the moment. And then it gives you an assistance of how to build this formula. This formula will look into these columns. It will not look at the tables and fields that you have inside the model. From this calculation or from this visual, I need to divide this column, which is basically the total sales. So I can just select total sales from here. So I want to divide the total sales on total sales itself, but with different aggregation. So let me now add again the total sales. And then in the axis, I can define the aggregation. The aggregation will be at the region level. This is exactly what we did using DAX. And then I hit the check mark, and you will see that I have the percentages here. It's actually now decimal numbers, not percentage, but if you check more or less the same, the 100% or the 1 in the total level, and then you have here 15% and here 0.15. So more or less it is similar. The only catch here that there is no direct formatting you can do for this new calculation. You have to do it using a formula. So I'm going again to the visualization. In the values section, you will find that you will have a new field here called percent of parent, and you will see this icon, meaning that it is coming from a visual calculation. I can just use this arrow and do edit calculation. I can add a function before divide. This function will be basically the format function. So I'm going to select and then Alt Enter. Let me use format. Alt Enter once more. Format will require a number. Here is the number coming from divide function, and then comma, Alt Enter. I need to give the format or the code for formatting between 2 quotes, 2 double quotes, 0.0%. Alt Enter, close the bracket for format, hit the check mark, and here you go. Back to the report view, you can just go to back to report, and here you go. It is exactly the same like percent of total region, percent of parent, exactly the same. If you want to add the one for percent of channel and region, for this report will be the percent of grand total. So let me add a new one. Right click, new visual calculation, percent of grand total. I'm going to keep the name. Let me change this field to total sales. This one also total sales. And the axis this time, let me delete to see the options. You cannot add a specific field here, but you can just select rows. And this will give you the percent of the grand total. Let me also add the format quickly. Hit the check mark and you are good to go. Back to report. And finally, you have here the percent of grand total. And it is exactly like percent of channel and region. So if you are not in control of your DAX and you just need to add the percentages, it is available using the new visual calculation. Finally, let's try now to get rid of the total sales as we did at the beginning. Now here I can just go and have here the total sales. Just let me uncheck and see what will happen. This will be an error. Why? Because as we explained, the calculation of the new visual calculation is depending on the fields that inside the visual itself. So the calculation now based on the total sales, when we remove it, you will have the error. So let me just undo. But there is another solution to this issue. If you want to just show the percentages without the values, you can go again to the values, the value section of the matrix. And then any of this new visual calculation, you can just click the arrow, edit calculation. Now you will see that you will have a button to hide or view. You can just hide whatever you want. Let me hide all the measures that we created using DAX. And in this way, and then back to report. And in this way, you can just present whatever you want to present without having this issue. However, you cannot remove the data that this calculations is based on. Otherwise, it will give you an error. It's very obvious that we can do the same job using different methods. You can use the new visual calculation or the DAX, and it always depends on your skills. If you are skilled in DAX, it's easier for you to use the DAX. If you are not, it's much easier to use the new visual calculation. Also, if you are using this calculation once in one of the visuals, that's fine. New visual calculation is a good solution. If you're going to use the same calculation many times inside the same model, so it's much better to use DAX. In the next videos, I'm going to try to simplify some of the concepts of the DAX, like the filter context and row context. That's why please stay tuned. Hope that was useful for you. Thank you very much for your time and see you next video, and bye.